So we were talking about that offer. Now, the offer, as I'm sure you're aware, is a promise. It's indefinite terms by an offerer calling for a promise or an action by an offeree. If you are in a situation where you are worried that a counteroffer would destroy what you've got on the table, and that this is their chance, and you don't want to do that, then you want to remember vague and illusory language is not an offer. And that means it's not a counteroffer either. So instead of putting your but in there, try putting your what if in there instead. We really like this offer. What if we wanted them to paint that front door red for us to accept it? Yeah, they don't want to paint the front door red. Well, it's a good thing we didn't make that a counteroffer then, isn't it? You hear what I'm saying? We like your offer, but we want the front door painted red, kills the offer on the table. We like your offer, what if, is vague and illusory. I am not creating a counteroffer by asking that question. Hypothetically, let's say the buyers want you to paint the front door red first. That's not a counteroffer. And so that is something to keep in mind as you're going forward and talking and negotiating, or you're concerned about creating a counter offer there when you have all control, then reach out with some vague and illusory language. Remember, offers are only good as long as the person who makes it wants it to stand, right up until it forms a contract, which means listing agreements and advertisements aren't binding. Okay, let me make sure we're clear on that. Listing agreements do not bind the seller to sell. They do bind the seller to the listing company. Advertisements that we make on behalf of the seller do not bind the seller to sell. Can a seller make an offer to the buyer? What do you guys think? Can sellers make offers to buyers? Yeah, absolutely. And if they do make an offer to our buyer, do we have to present it? Yeah. We're going to have to present all offers within 3 days of our receipt of them. And it doesn't even have to be a written offer. It can be an oral offer, because we're not allowed to make decisions on behalf of our clients. So telling somebody they have to write up the offer would be thereby making the decision, wouldn't it? So all offers are going to need to be presented within our 3 days of our receiving them. Except for that one guy who doesn't think he has to do that, which we can always make a complaint and the commission would be happy to investigate. Your name is Jane Doe. Your number is 999-9999-9999. Yeah. I asked somebody at the commission, how do you do an anonymous complaint on their complaint form that has all that information? And that's exactly what the investigator told me. She said, nobody said it has to be your name. Yeah. I said, you're a genius. She said, they don't pay me enough. I said, that is true. So requirements for all offer presentations, we've got to present them. We want to do it. We want to do it sooner rather than later. Because remember, there is no such thing as a binding offer. The longer we hold on to an offer, the less likely it is that it's a viable offer by the time we get around to presenting it. So we want to present it immediately. When we have multiple offers, we want to present these as they come in, even if you're under contract. What if your client says, all right, we're under contract, no more offers? Can you refuse to present any other offers after you're already under contract? Clearly not. You got to present every offer at every point in the process, even if it's going to blow up the deal. Thank gosh we have the backup contract addendum. We'll use that. We do not get to accept or reject an offer on our client's behalf. Let me tell you a little story of what happens when you're working with a jerk. Because I am a little bit of a jerk. I was working with these buyers and we had seen this house and it was ugly. They thought it was an ugly house. And I told agent remarks, did not want to say it was an ugly house. So instead I put in there what I personally thought, which was that it was a little overpriced and that it needed some staging. Well, I got an email a week later from the listing agent that said, hey, we've dropped the price $5,000. You need to tell your buyers they're going to be interested. And I said, well, my buyers aren't interested, but if I have other buyers at that price point, I'll make sure to let them know. And she went, no, you have to tell your clients they're going to want to know. And I went, no, they're not going to want to know. And I don't have to do anything because I'm a bit of a jerk. So I hung up the phone and then I immediately called my clients because I'm that kind of person too. And I said, hey, they dropped the price $5,000. Do you want it? And they said, no, it was ugly. And I said, I know, that's what I told them. So I hung up the phone and thought no more about it. The next day I come into my office, I open up my computer and there in my email is an offer from the listing agent to my buyers for an asking price $5,000 less than the price at which they had seen the property. Now, what did I have to do?
Present it.
Yeah, now I had to go tell my buyer. And I learned an important lesson that day. And it was, if it's ugly, just tell them that. Just tell them my clients aren't interested. It's not attractive to them. Don't try to sugarcoat it because that is not going to help you in the long run. And then ultimately, I learned another important lesson. It doesn't do me any good to be a jerk, but it doesn't stop me either. I'm still a jerk. I can't help myself. So when you're dealing with people like me across the table, if you need to get to the other side, put it in an offer. What happens if an offer changes their mind before acceptance? There's no contract, right?
Yeah.
The offer is dead. As soon as they tell us, we'll kill it through the phone. I can kill that offer dead through the phone. I don't even have to put it in writing. I want to put it in writing because I like to have a timestamp on things that says I communicated it, but I can call them and say, you know, that offer, it's dead. It's dead. I killed it. And that is why it is so very important and vital that we communicate as quickly and efficiently as possible. Because if they kill the offer before we have the opportunity to accept, what happens to an offer once it's been rescinded, everybody? Kill it. It is void. It is canceled. It is dead forever. It cannot be resurrected. And when it comes to communication, you want to be careful about what method you choose to communicate, because you could always call them on the phone, show up at their office. But do you remember what you have to do when you reach out to another agent on behalf of a client? The very first thing you have to do?
Who you represent.
That's right. So you call me and you're in the middle. Go ahead and call me and tell me, if you don't mind, Rahama, that you're calling on behalf of your company representing a buyer.
Hi, this is Rahama.
Rescind? Huh? Rescind?
I'm sorry. Say it
Yeah,
again.
you're calling to tell me you have a client who wants to accept the offer, right? Or yeah, that we made? Yeah, rescind.
You're
Okay,
rescinding?
yeah,
Well, I'm screwed.
yes.
I wasn't expecting that, Catherine. I was like, what are we doing here?
Right. We
Oh,
gotta
yeah.
be so careful. If they want to communicate that they are not making, that they don't want to make the offer anymore, when I call to accept it, I have to go through that litany. Which means I gotta go, hi, this is I'm having before you gotten on and go, rescind.
Oh.
Right. What if I show up at your office and I'm at the receptionist desk and you're back in your office and your clients just said, oh, I don't want to make, yeah, cancel that. Or heck, they did it hours ago and you forgot. You're like, I'll get right on that. Now you hear them up front going, this is, and you're just sitting back in your office. You just go, rescind. And you could be just like, I'm sorry, what? What is that? What's happening? Oh, I'm pretty sure that agent is rescinding. I'm pretty sure that's for you. What were you going to say? So you got to be so careful. Now, here's one thing to keep in mind. If somebody wants to rescind their offer, is there any way me communicating that we've accepted going to force that person through the contract? In other words, by communicating that we accept before they communicate that they rescind, will that force them to go into the contract and go forward and make that purchase? Can the brokers force people into contract?
No.
Can I force anyone to do anything? I can't even get my dog to come here. Okay? There's only one profession who gets to make someone do something.
Court.
Right. The judge. Only a judge can make people do. So that means when I am in this race, this competition with the other agent, it's not because I want to keep a deal together as much as it is because I have a client who might want to take that person to court. And I need to give them proof that my client was first. My client communicated first. Whether that means that other person is in breach or my client is out of a contract or whatever, I don't care. As long as we got there before the other side. So I can't keep a deal together if the buyer ends up not wanting to buy or the seller not to sell. That's between them and a judge. I just give them the very best evidence file we can produce. So if I am going in there under oral communication, I might be at a disadvantage. Let's look at some scenarios and see if we are under contract or if we are rescinded. What if the seller's agent calls to tell you that you have a contract, but you just sent an email saying the buyers have canceled their offer?
Timestamp.
Timestamp, Maria. Excellent. What do I'm gonna say on the phone to that person? I'm gonna say what?
I sent an email at 11 o'clock this morning.
Yeah, can you check your email for me? What time does that say that you got that email? You got an email from me. Awesome. What is the timestamp on that? All right, well, that was 2 minutes before this phone call even started. So exactly. Guys, before I say I sent it, make sure they received it because it's the timestamp on their receipt, not when I sent. So before I get on my high horse, and I do love to get up on there, okay? I didn't even know I could ride, but I'm natural. get up on my high horse and start shooting things from above, I want to be aware that they might not have received it yet. So check first. What if the buyer's agent sends notice of acceptance of counteroffer by mail to an agent who has just called the buyer's agent to say that the sellers have accepted another offer?
Depends when it was sent, right? If it was sent before, you said that as soon as it was dropped in the mailbox, that's the timestamp, right?
That's right. As soon as it goes in the mailbox, they're what? It's communicated. So they'll be under
Communicated.
contract. Right.
Mhm.
Right. So as soon as it goes in the mailbox, they are under contract. You see a problem here?
But so they sent it in the mailbox, but they didn't really give them a call and let them know that it's
Right.
coming.
Yeah.
So it's not just the action, but it needs to be communicated, right?
It has been communicated. That's the terrifying part here.
Mm-hmm.
It is considered communicated. They just don't know it yet.
Right.
So what did they do in the interim? What has the seller done here? So what
Now
do
we
we
have
have here?
two. Well, we have
Yes.
You have two
two
offers,
contracts.
We have not two offers. We have
two contracts.
two contracts,
contracts.
two
Yeah.
fully binding, executed, communicated agreements. Does the seller have two properties to sell?
No.
No.
No, which means that seller is in a lot of trouble. As soon as it's in the mailbox, it is delivered, which means you never want to accept one offer while another offer is outstanding. This guy did it in the wrong order.
Mhm.
Yeah. Should have
He should have
called that.
called. Yeah.
Yes, Maria, exactly.
Yeah, I should have called to say, hey, are you guys still thinking about that? You know, what happened there? We have another offer. Someone else is looking at the property.
Yes, yes. So that they could go, oh, we put that in the mail yesterday. You'll get it in the next 3 to 7 weeks, depending on the how the mail is running. That's right. So it is super important to be aware that the mailbox doesn't give us a heads up. It's up to the agent to, and the agent doesn't have to. If you want to make sure you're communicated and there is no potential of a communication coming back at you, stick it in the mailbox. And you know it is sent. Who's getting ready to go print out all their contracts and stick them in the mailbox? Yeah, exactly. How do you know it's in the mailbox? Exactly, Maria. This is what I'm going to say if anybody ever tells me it's in the mailbox. You know what I'm going to say? You know what I'm going to say? Awesome. Which mailbox was that? Okay. No, I'm just curious. Which one did you drop it in? Because I'm going to go see what time it last picks up. Because I'm going to look for the timestamp. I'm going to look it up. That's me. Because remember, I'm a jerk.
So Catherine, this seems a little outdated that somebody would actually use a mailbox. Have you ever had this scenario? Have you ever received an offer by mail?
Nope.
Okay.
John is not.
All right.
You're
So
like,
it's good to know the rule, but it's probably not going to play out in front of us.
I will make this point for you, Rahama. They do still have a rule on the books for how to communicate an offer by Morse code. What we do now is we have .loop and DocuSign, right? So as long as everybody's looped in, it's communicated immediately anyway. DocuSign, I believe, has created that same kind of loop where as long as everybody's in, they're all seeing the signatures as soon as it's signed. So at that point, this whole conversation is basically moot, right? Because all the agents receive that communication simultaneously. All the parties do as well.
I think the only thing is that you know how there's still some folks that are not very comfortable with electronics and you'll have people that want to do with signatures still, they don't have access, you know, they don't know how to access their emails, etc. So yeah, there are those situations.
Absolutely. There are still people out there who want to do this on paper. Being out there in Eastern North Carolina, you're going to see a lot of them, right? You have an aging population, and down there in Wilmington, you also are going to have an aging population because of the attraction of the beach. Well, actually, you have all the population. You have young and old. Anybody who doesn't want to have to drive down Capitol Boulevard. All right, let's see if we can make this a contract. So yeah, the important thing to remember here truly is be on the lookout for cross communications. Make sure that as you're communicating those offers, acceptance as soon as you can to avoid the possibility of it being rescinded in the interim. Yeah. All right, let's see if we can make this a contract. We've got a selling agent who has got a buyer. They make an offer. The seller looks at that offer and decides he wants to accept it. How do we do that?
The seller signs and the agent communicates.
That's it. Don't forget the communication. Signing isn't the rest of the story. Communication is. All right, this time let's try this. Is this a contract? This time I've got a buyer makes an offer, the seller counters, and then while the buyer is thinking about it, the seller decides to withdraw. Are we under contract?
No, because the counter offer cancels the initial offer, correct?
That's right, exactly. So the initial offer was killed as soon as we made the counter offer, and then the counter offer was killed before they were able to accept it. So they communicated that withdrawal before communication of acceptance could come through. Good job. All right, how about this one? We've got the buyer making an offer. The seller counters. The buyer counters back. The listing agent reviews it. They sign it. They drop it in the mail, and the buyer withdraws 1 day later.
Technically, we are under contract.
That's right. We are under contract from the moment the agent did what?
Dropped it in the mailbox.
Put it in the mailbox. Which, if you're thinking dot loop, as soon as it's signed, it's done. Buyers can't just back out of it after that. It's very important that they understand that if they want to withdraw, they need to do it before they see the email that comes through that says this has been done. Okay, they cannot back out. Make sure those clients understand when they make that offer in that instantaneous environment that there won't be an opportunity to rescind it. Alrighty, let's look here. All right, we make the offer. We counter back. They review it. They sign it. They call, they say, hey, we've signed it. We're under contract. The agent can't find the client. Are we under contract?
Yeah, technically.
Yeah. 2 days later, the buyer calls their agent and gets cold feet.
I mean, you're still on the contract.
We're under contract.
but You could
He
just
can
withdraw.
sue, you know.
Because we're an agency and we represent them, so we're it.
Communication to us is communication
Everything.
to them. Guys, if they don't understand that, the younger generation particularly has been raised on ghosting. If they never see each other again, that's okay with them. They just stop talking and they think that that means the whole relationship is dead. You got to explain to them that they can ghost you all day. That does not get them out of a binding contract. That in fact, ghosting you is the last thing they want to do for their best interest. I mean, it's bad enough to be ghosted when you're not in the middle of that, but if they are under contract,
Mhm.
did it happen under contract?
Yeah,
Tell us
it
about it.
did. So he was like 28 and very just all over the place. He kept looking at different properties. I want to put an offer on this. I want to put an offer on this. I want to put an offer on this. So we finally got him under contract. When it was time to pay a due diligence check, he was nowhere to be found.
Yep.
And so it's like, okay, 1 day goes by, 2 days go by. We're like, okay, 3 days, like, dude, we need to. And he wasn't returning the lender's call, my broker in charge call, nobody. He would not answer the phone. So because there was no due diligence, so we had to get out of the contract.
Mm.
And then like a week later, he was like, oh, I'm sorry, I was out of town.
Oh, no,
Yeah.
you fired him?
Yeah. Well, he fired me.
Oh, well, and that's the luckiest thing that could have happened. Yeah, there's nothing that stops him from putting it back out on the market and turning and suing him at the same time. They have every right to sue because once it
Yeah.
is communicated and they don't deliver the money, that'll be breach.
Yeah.
Exactly. The only way, in
Mhm.
fact, that a buyer can breach the contract during the due diligence period in North Carolina is to not deliver the money. It is very important that we make sure our buyers understand that the last thing they want to do if they get cold feet is not contact us. They've got to contact us immediately so that we can withdraw the offer. The only thing they can do at that point to save themselves is deliver the funds and then cancel the contract via the due diligence period and get their earnest money back. Make
Yep.
sure buyers get that. You know, there's always an agent out there you don't like very much that you can send that person to and get a referral fee for. So you just remember that, okay? Next time you're dealing with any of the people who might not have capacity or the capacity to make you crazy, you don't have to work with them. You can take a referral fee. All righty, let's see if we're under contract in this situation. All righty, what if the seller's agent tells me the sellers have signed, but I haven't seen the contract yet? Are we under contract?
Yeah.
Yes. Guys, we don't have to lay our eyes on it to know that it's true. If the other agent says it's been signed, we have the right to rely on that communication. Not we have a deal, but it's been signed. I am still not going to contact my clients until I've sent a text or an email that says, thank you so much for telling me that it was signed. I'm going to go tell my clients now. Send. In fact, well, I would say I'd send that to both of them, but I don't want them to have that agent's contact information necessarily. Oh, wait, they're going to get that in the offer to purchase and contract anyway. So I might just stick it in the email to all of them and go, you know, just wanted to let you know he said, so that we can make sure that we've got it on record there that that's what they said. And it doesn't require them to respond. It's called tacit approval. Okay. If they don't respond saying that's not what we talked about, then they are agreeing that that's what we talked about. So just send them an email saying this is what we just talked about, and then go ahead and communicate to your client based on that information. That will go in your transaction file and back you up. All right, what if I'm the buyer's agent and I get an email stating the offer has been accepted and I die before I can tell my clients?
My big or whomever is going to be assigned my file needs to pursue and continue that.
That's right. They're under contract.
Right.
There's only one time this won't be under contract, and that is if I work alone, right? If I'm a sole
Right, right.
practitioner and there is nobody to open my emails for me, if there's nobody to continue the communication, then it's going to die with me. What if my buyer dies before the offer is accepted? That's right. There's no contract. We will see once under contract, we will force buyers' heirs to buy. What if the agent goes crazy? Yes, I did put Kanye up here. Bless his heart.
It's still valid. It's just someone else in the agency will have to take it over.
Exactly. Exactly. It's still we are not a party to their contract. And that's something very important to remember as you go forward. Your compensation will never be mentioned in our buyers on sellers offers to purchase and contract. Your agency duration, your duties, your liabilities, they have nothing to do with the contract between the buyer and the seller. Once the buyer and the seller go under contract together, you are superfluous, bless your heart. If you get hit by a bus or go crazy or your firm disintegrates or you become inactive, they still go forward under their contract. There's nothing that we can do that's going to sever that contract between them once they're in it. Only they can do that. What if it turns out the buyer or seller is certifiable?
Not valid.
That is going to be a question of validity. Exactly, Calandra. But will it be void or voidable? And that's a great question. We'll talk about that more. What if the seller dies after the offer is executed, but before it is communicated? I know, right? That is a
Nope.
really good question. I have no idea. I don't know what we're going to do now. Contact an attorney, get the BIC involved. All right. That is a question where you have every right to proceed, but you might be better off talking to, as Rahima pointed out, talking to a BIC or an attorney first. Alrighty, so the first thing we have to have a legal contract is mutual assent, and all the stuff that we've just been talking about, this is all to do with mutual assent. It is that idea of demonstrating the intention to be inside the contract together and to have carefully considered the terms via offer and counter offer. The next important requirement, essential element for a valid contract is consideration. Consideration is the thing of value being offered in exchange. When we're doing contracts for real estate, consideration typically is what? What form do we tend to see it in? Cash, exactly. But it could be anything of value. It could be stocks, it could be jewelry, it could be exchanged for real property. Heck, we could even trade property for services. Marry my mother, get this lovely house. Right? Now, what's the thing of value? You get to put up with my mother. Remember that these things of consideration are valuable to the people in the contract. They do not necessarily have to have value to everyone. Consideration is whatever is valuable to them. So as long as there is something of value on the line here, that will count as consideration and help us to form a binding contract. The next thing we need is capacity of the parties. And this, guys, is going to affect their legal ability to get into that contract. Capacity is going to impact the void and voidability of a contract. Capacity is affected by our age. It's affected by duress and undue influence. It's affected by intoxication and sanity. And I mean both forms of sanity. Okay? I'm not just talking about the one where you've got medication to stay in your right mind. I'm talking about the one where the judge says you'll never be back in your right mind again. At least not for 13 years. So which of these is it going to be? Is it going to be void or is it going to be voidable? It depends on what is causing the question of capacity. So let us look and see. When we're talking about being underage or intoxicated, is it a void contract or is it a voidable contract?
Voidable.
This is a voidable contract.
Voidable.
That's right. Because when a person is underage or intoxicated, they have the ability to regain capacity or to gain capacity in the sense of being underage. Here is our major difference between void and voidable. Void is where they never had capacity. And voidable is where they essentially could get back to capacity. So I could get back to being in my right mind if I sober up. I can get to legal capacity by turning 18. But as long as I stand inside this position of incapacitated, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what I'm doing. At any point, I could decide, I don't want to keep doing it. So what we're waiting for in these situations is for the person to return or achieve capacity and decide they don't want to go forward, or that they do. If they decide that they don't want to go forward, the contract is void. If they decide they do want to go forward and they move forward with it, the contract is valid. And the fact that it is at their discretion is what makes it a voidable transaction. They have the right to void it or validate it at the point where they have capacity. So I'll give you this example. I am from a small town, okay, which meant that everybody knew everybody. There are 4 stoplights in the whole town. And I happened to be going to high school with the son of the owner of the Chevy dealer. And what that meant was every time somebody on the football team turned 16, they rode on down to the Chevy dealer to pick out their new car. And their daddy would meet them down there and they would co-sign and they'd get their new car at the Chevy dealer because that was how it worked. Well, one day, one of them turned 16 and they drove on down to the Chevy dealer and daddy couldn't make it. But here it's a small town and everybody knows everybody and they know that daddy. So what does the dealer do? He says, you go ahead and sign and I'll get your daddy to come by and sign later and let's get you in your car. So the dealer hands a 16-year-old keys to a brand new car with just the 16-year-old's signature on the contract. And the 16-year-old gets into the car, drives it to the first intersection, goes through it, and gets T-boned. What does this 16-year-old do? He goes back to the dealership. He takes the keys to the broken car into the dealer's office, finds the dealer, he gave them to him and says, you know what? I think I'm going to take the bus. That's exactly, you laughing. That's exactly what the dealer did. So he walked out and the dealer called the father and said to the father, let's talk about what happened. I'm so sorry about your son. And dad, oh, it's all, he's fine. He's not a scratch on him. He'll be fine. He's learned an important lesson, blah, blah, blah. Dealer says, so how do you want to handle the car? And the dad says, what do you mean? And dealer says, well, how do you want to pay for it? And he said, I thought he brought you the keys. Yeah, he did. So, but how do you want to pay for it? He goes, he told you he didn't want it. Yes. Well, there you go. But we have a contract. And he goes, no, you have a contract with a 16-year-old boy. And that 16-year-old boy told you he didn't want to do it anymore, which means you don't have a contract anymore. That contract stood in a voidable position until that child turned 18. Yeah. At 18 years old, as soon as he turns 18 and makes another payment on the car, now it's a valid contract. If he turns 18 and says, I don't want to buy it, void. At any point until he turns 18, I don't want to buy it, void. The only thing that keeps it valid is that underage child's decision to continue being a part of it. This is why we don't get to sell real property to people under 18. Because can you imagine them owning real property for a year and then going, I've changed my mind. I don't want to own this. You're going to have a hard time finding the sellers and being like, sorry, you got to take this back. This kid doesn't want it anymore. right? Voidable is scary because we're waiting for that person to get back into capacity to determine if they want to keep going forward or if they want to go, oh no, that was a bad idea. I shouldn't have done that. Which is one thing if they're 16, because 16 is going to turn 18. And you can see that on their license or their birth certificate. But how do you know when they're intoxicated? You want to be very careful about the people you get into contract with for agency. Don't think they can't come back and void a transaction after it's taken place, because they can. And then do you know what they're going to want from you? Your money. Yeah. Because, oh, well, it turns out that guy was actually on drugs the whole time. And now that he's sobered up, he's like, oh, crap, I didn't want to buy that. And it's not just drugs or alcohol. So what do we do? Right? We avoid the situation. We don't ever want to spend time and money on something that ultimately we're not going to see money come back to us on. So I don't want to ever have to pay my commission back because it turns out that person didn't have capacity. The best thing I can do, if I have the sensation or the impression that this person is on something or should be on something and they're not, is to recommend them to another agent that I don't like very much and take a referral fee. This is the best advice I can give anyone. Now, if a person has been declared incompetent by a judge, any contract you get into with that person will be what?
Void.
From the very beginning.
Mhm.
So while Brittany was under a care of Jamie Spears, you could not get into a legal contract with Brittany. If Brittany showed up at your office with thousands of dollars in cash that she'd stashed away under her bed and said, help me buy a condo, there's nothing that would stop you from helping Brittany buy the condo. Nothing. Except the closing attorney whose job it is to make sure Brittany has her capacity. If I have an inept closing attorney, we can sell Brittany a condo and find out later that we never had the right to sell Brittany that condo because we should have sold it to Jane. Void contracts can still be performed. It's our job to be aware of who we're working with. What if they're like our friend Kanye here, who doesn't have a judge's declaration, but instead he has a medical note, a letter from the doctor. Now, I just want you to know I've had Kanye up here for years, long before Kim outed him as a bipolar. But now that we know that Kanye is bipolar, that means that when Kanye is not on his medication, he is not in his right mind. If Kanye shows up at your office to buy a private island, he may or may not have capacity, which means he creates what kind of contract with us?
Voidable, right?
Voidable.
Depending if he's taken, yeah.
Not only depending on if he's on medication or not, but depending on if he wants to validate it when he is. So he could have been off his meds and bought that private island with us, got back onto his meds and been like, this was the best decision I ever made. In which case he makes the next payment on the private island. We have a valid contract. He paid on it. He validated it when he was in his right mind. But we get into a contract with Kanye when he's off his meds and he comes back into his capacity, gets back on his meds and goes, why did I buy this island? He has the right to turn around and go, I'm not making another payment on it. I didn't do that when I had capacity. So it's totally up to the party if they want to validate it or call it void. And that's what voidable means. It doesn't mean that it is one way or another. It means it could go one way or another, depending on the action of the party whose capacity is in question. So void is always illegal and valid is always binding. But when it's voidable, there's this big question. What is the party going to do next? Lawful objective. The purpose of the contract is going to have to be within the bounds of the law. If it's not within the bounds of the law, then we will not have a valid contract. What happens if one of these men breaches this contract between them?
They probably shoot themselves, or each other.
Exactly, Maria. We're looking at
Really
street
good.
justice here.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. When there is no lawful objective, it means we are not going to be able to go to court and seek retribution, which does not stop a number of people in Florida, right? You've seen the Florida man who sued the guy for not getting him his drugs. Like he sold me sugar powder instead of cocaine. I love it when they do this in Florida, because what's going to happen there?
They're both going to jail.
Exactly. The judge is going to be like, I'm so sorry, I can't hear this. This is not a valid contract. Bailiff, if you could pick them up on the way out. When we don't have a lawful objective, we have a void contract. So if we're not doing something legal to begin with, then our contract is not valid. It stands in a void position from the beginning. But I don't know I can't say this enough. If you want to cook crystal meth and sell it, no one will stop you. No one will stop somebody from buying it. Void contracts can still be performed. You want to sell a house for a person who doesn't actually own it? If you have an incompetent closing attorney, no one will stop you. You want to help a buyer buy who's out there committing loan fraud? If there's not a lender catching it, no one's going to stop you. It is possible to perform a void contract. So you need to make sure that you're surrounded by competent partners to ensure that if something slips through your net, it does not also slip through theirs.